On the eve of George Floyd's funeral in the United States, the EFF at home has held nationwide demonstrations in solidarity with Black Lives Matter protesters. The death of Floyd has seen millions across the world protesting against racism and police brutality. On the domestic front, the EFF took credit for first offering legal aid to Collins Khosa's family after his death in lockdown. All right, Samekle Maseko joining us now to update us on this story. Samekle, can we start with the numbers today? How many demonstrators are out on the streets?
Well, Francis, in South Africa, it was not an issue about how many numbers the EFF pulled out to the streets of Johannesburg, of Pretoria, rather, outside the United States Embassy, or in Sandton, outside the Consulate General of the United States of America. You'd remember that there are laws put in place that there should be no gatherings of more than 50 people, as stipulated by the COVID-19 lockdown regulations, as gazetted by the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. But the EFF in Sandton and in Pretoria were able to pull a few numbers. In the visuals that I've seen, I've not been able to view the visuals of the picket. There was another one in Durban. I saw the former Deputy Secretary General of the EFF, Hlengiwe Mkhaliphi, leading that one, Vusi Khosa, the provincial chairperson. And there was another one in the Western Cape, led by the national chairperson of the EFF, Veronica Menti. I did not see the visuals of the numbers of those ones, but the ones that I did see in Sandton and the one in Pretoria, led by the Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, a significant number of South Africans and number of EFF members and supporters did come out to voice out their frustrations against the racism that is spreading itself out in the United States of America, and also the police brutality that we are seeing in these two countries. That would be in South Africa as well, with the death of Collins Khosa at the hands of the South African National Defence Force, with the EFF gearing up for the best legal minds, in the words of Julius Malema, to sue the state and also to get the state to pay for the funeral of Collins Khosa, which the EFF has already footed the bill for, saying if government pays out and if their legal bid is successful, that money would go to the widow of Collins Khosa.
Tell us more about the parallels drawn between George Floyd's death and Collins Khosa here at home, both linked to an oppressive past.
Not one, if one may say, particularly with South Africa, it's linked to an oppressive past of the way the South African National Defence Force has been handling itself, particularly when it comes to the issues of Collins Khosa. You know that the Department of SANDF and military veterans, through their minister, has issued out a report exonerating SANDF of any wrongdoing in the death of Collins Khosa. We do know that the EFF is challenging this one. But when you look at the historical factor of South Africa and the role of security forces that have played, particularly in the townships in the liberation struggle, and how they were manhandling the African black majority here within this country when it comes to the issues of apartheid, then you go to the racism that is entrenched itself in the United States of America. You'd remember that the African black Americans in the United States, particularly if you look at your Martin Luther King's, that particular civic movement in the States inspired the liberation struggle here in South Africa, which was spearheaded by the likes of John Langalibalele Dube and the likes of Albert Luthuli, Walter Sisulu, Nelson Mandela later on, and the formation of the ANC Youth League in 1944. So the parallels of that civic movement and the influence that they had within the liberation struggle within South Africa and the broader African continent is properly documented. So Julius Malema drawing the parallels of how African Americans have always been there for the African continent, and in particular South Africa, when South Africa was the one that was spearheading and the liberation struggle within this country, alongside many organizations such as AZAPO, PAC, ANC, IAP, and other movements such as the Black Consciousness Movement, led by then Stephen Bantu Biko. So it goes and to a long political history that South Africa has with African Black Americans, particularly with how they helped conscientize the African people when it comes to fighting for their own rights, with African Americans fighting for their own space within that country. But Julius Malema also drawing onto modern contemporary politics currently taking place in the world, saying that Africans are not, and black people in particular, are not respected globally, and looking what is currently happening in Ganzo in China, particularly when you look at how Africans have been asked not to go to restaurants within that particular, obviously the Chinese government denying those reports as well, but we've seen various people being locked out of various restaurants in that country, video clips emerging on social media.
All right, thank you very much, Samekle Maseko from the SABC, monitoring the EFF protests in solidarity with those anti-racist demonstrations taking place across the world.